All Vikings, let's win this game.
Not every offseason creates this many unanswered questions, but that's exactly where the Vikings are right now. One overlooked veteran is suddenly being mentioned as a breakout player. At the same time, Adam Thielen has weighed in with some surprising perspective, and another young star is feeling the pressure to prove he belongs among the NFC North's best. By the end of this video, one of these storylines might end up shaping Minnesota's entire 2026 season. Sometimes the players who end up making the biggest difference aren't the stars everyone expects. They're the veterans who quietly arrive with little fanfare, earn the trust of the coaching staff, and suddenly find themselves making game-changing plays when the spotlight gets brightest. That's why one recent prediction caught my attention, because it points towards someone most fans probably haven't spent much time thinking about. That player is cornerback James Pierre. ESPN's Ben Solak believes Pierre could quietly become one of Minnesota's biggest breakout performers in 2026, and the more you dig into the situation, the more it starts to make sense. Brian Flores has built a defense that doesn't rely on expensive superstar cornerbacks across the board. Instead, he thrives by rotating defensive backs, disguising coverages, bringing pressure from every angle, and asking his corners to play disciplined football within an aggressive system. It's the type of environment where overlooked veterans can suddenly thrive. Pierre spent several seasons with the Pittsburgh Steelers before signing with Minnesota this offseason, and his familiarity with Flores and passing game coordinator Gerald Alexander goes beyond simply watching film. They already know what kind of player he is, what he does well, and where he fits within this defensive philosophy. That level of trust matters, especially when opportunities can appear without warning. Last season, Pierre played only 219 coverage snaps, so we're talking about a relatively small sample size. Even so, the numbers were impossible to ignore. He allowed a passer rating of just 49.8, one of the best marks among NFL cornerbacks. Of course, Vikings fans have seen impressive statistics before that didn't always translate into larger roles, so it's fair to approach this with some caution. After all, Pierre has started only 13 games in a long NFL career. There's a big difference between shining in limited opportunities and carrying a major workload over an entire season. But here's where things get interesting. Minnesota chose to move on from Fabian Moreau despite his own strong production, and instead brought Pierre into the room. That decision suggests Flores believes Pierre offers something that fits this defense even better. Maybe it's his versatility. Maybe it's his understanding of the scheme. Maybe it's simply the confidence built from working together in Pittsburgh. Whatever the reason, it feels intentional rather than accidental. And let's not forget how fortunate the Vikings were last season. Byron Murphy Jr. and Isaiah Rodgers stayed healthy through all 17 games, something that rarely happens in today's NFL. Counting on that kind of luck again would be risky. Injuries are part of every season, especially in a defense that asks so much from its secondary. If one starter misses time, Pierre could suddenly go from a rotational depth piece to someone playing meaningful snaps in critical moments. That's how careers can change in this league. Vikings fans know championship defenses aren't built only with stars. They're built with players who seize opportunities when adversity hits. If James Pierre becomes one of those hidden contributors, Brian Flores might once again prove he has an incredible eye for finding value where the rest of the league wasn't looking. And with the defense looking for another difference maker, the spotlight naturally shifts to the position every fan will be watching once training camp begins. There isn't a more important position in football, and right now, there might not be a more fascinating quarterback situation anywhere in the NFL than the one unfolding in Minnesota. Every practice, every preseason snap, every decision Kevin O'Connell makes is going to be analyzed from every possible angle, because the Vikings aren't simply choosing a Week 1 starter. They're making a decision that could shape the future of this franchise. That's why a recent prediction about Kyler Murray caught so much attention. Not because anyone expects it to happen, but because it highlights just how high the stakes really are. Tyler Forness of A to Z Sports floated the possibility that if Murray were to lose the starting job to J.J. McCarthy, he could ultimately request a trade. It's an interesting scenario, and while it's still speculation rather than a report, it makes sense when you think about where Murray is in his career. This isn't a young quarterback with unlimited time to prove himself. He's playing for what could very well be his last opportunity to earn another major NFL contract. Sitting on the bench simply wouldn't accomplish that. Meanwhile, the pressure isn't only on Murray, it's just as intense for McCarthy. The former first-round pick entered last season carrying enormous expectations, but his first opportunity as the Vikings starting quarterback didn't go the way anyone hoped. He flashed talent, he showed toughness, but inconsistency, turnovers, and growing pains prevented him from firmly establishing himself as the long-term answer. That's why Minnesota made the aggressive move to bring in Murray after his departure from Arizona. Some fans immediately viewed it as a lack of confidence in McCarthy. Others saw it as smart roster management by a team determined not to waste a championship-caliber roster while waiting for a young quarterback to develop. Honestly, both viewpoints have some truth behind them. Kevin O'Connell knows this offense is built to compete now. Justin Jefferson remains one of the best receivers on the planet. Jordan Addison continues to develop. The offensive pieces are already in place. Wasting another season because of uncertainty at quarterback simply wasn't an option. Then there's Carson Wentz, whose return quietly added another wrinkle to the entire competition. He wasn't brought back just to hold a clipboard as an emergency third quarterback. His presence gives Minnesota experienced insurance while also making roster decisions much more complicated once training camp comes to an end. According to the speculation, Wentz projects as the backup regardless of who wins the starting job, leaving the loser of the Murray-McCarthy battle potentially without a place on the final roster. That's what makes this competition feel so different from the usual preseason quarterback battle. This isn't simply about earning playing time. Careers, contracts, and futures could all be affected by one decision. Of course, if you're asking me what I believe is the most likely outcome, I still think Kyler Murray enters camp with a legitimate chance to win this job outright. When healthy, we've all seen what he can do. Over 7 NFL seasons, he's thrown for more than 20,000 yards, accounted for over 150 total touchdowns through the air and on the ground, and consistently demonstrated the kind of athletic ability that very few quarterbacks possess. The biggest question has never been talent. It's been durability and consistency. If those two concerns finally stay under control, Minnesota may have found exactly the spark this offense has been searching for. If not, the pressure surrounding this position will only continue to grow as the season gets closer. Long before this quarterback battle became one of the hottest topics in the NFL, there was someone inside the Vikings family who understood exactly what real competition can do for a player. Someone who spent years earning everything instead of having anything handed to him. That's why Adam Thielen's perspective carries so much weight. When he recently shared his thoughts on Minnesota's quarterback situation, he didn't see controversy, he saw opportunity. Speaking on Sirius XM NFL radio, Thielen made it clear that he believes this is a win-win situation for the organization. From his point of view, bringing Kyler Murray into the building wasn't about creating unnecessary drama. It was about making everyone better. He pointed out that because Murray wasn't acquired through a massive long-term financial commitment, the Vikings have flexibility. If things work out, they've upgraded the position. If they don't, the franchise isn't trapped by the decision. That's smart roster building, but what really stood out to me was what he said about J.J. McCarthy. Thielen believes competition is exactly what young players need. He even reflected on his own career, explaining that every time the Vikings drafted another receiver or brought in someone to compete for his job, it pushed him to elevate his own game. Instead of fearing competition, he embraced it, and he thinks McCarthy should do the same. Those comments feel especially important because they come from someone who understands the culture Kevin O'Connell is trying to build. Nothing is guaranteed. Every starting role should be earned. Every player should feel challenged to improve. According to Thielen, that's not a negative environment. It's the kind of environment that helps talented players reach another level. He also had plenty of praise for McCarthy himself, calling him a phenomenal person, a hard worker, and someone who has that dog in him. Those aren't empty compliments. They're reminders that while McCarthy's first NFL season had its ups and downs, the organization still believes in the qualities that made him a first-round draft pick. Last year wasn't perfect. His overall production included over 1,600 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions, along with moments that showed both exciting potential and understandable rookie inconsistency. Those numbers don't define his entire future. Development in the NFL is rarely a straight line, especially at quarterback. But Thielen didn't stop there. He also explained why he's excited about what Kyler Murray can bring to this offense. He's admired Murray from afar for years, praising his explosive playmaking ability while acknowledging that leadership will ultimately determine whether this second opportunity becomes a success. That's probably the biggest challenge facing Murray now. Nobody questions his arm talent, nobody questions his athleticism. The real question is whether he can become the kind of leader this locker room needs every single week. If he does, Thielen believes the ceiling for this offense is incredibly high. And honestly, it's hard to disagree. Just imagine an offense led by a healthy, confident Kyler Murray, throwing to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison while Kevin O'Connell calls plays. That's enough talent to make any defense uncomfortable. but none of it matters unless someone clearly separates himself during training camp. Eventually, the debate will end, a starter will be named, and that's when we'll find out whether all of this competition truly made the Vikings stronger. Sometimes the pressure on a young player doesn't come from inside the locker room. It comes from the expectations that keep growing every single season. Every catch gets analyzed. Every mistake gets magnified. Every conversation eventually turns toward one question. Is this player truly part of the franchise's future? That's where Jordan Addison finds himself as he enters what could become the most important year of his NFL career. The talent has never been the issue. Vikings fans have seen the flashes ever since he arrived in Minnesota. The route running, the body control, the ability to create separation when defenses are already focused on slowing down Justin Jefferson. But now, the conversation is becoming bigger than highlight plays. It's about whether Addison is ready to prove he deserves a long-term investment from the organization. A recent ranking from Lombardi Avenue only added more fuel to that discussion. Looking at the top wide receivers in the NFC North heading into the 2026 season, Justin Jefferson rightfully claimed the top spot, followed by Detroit's Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. Sitting right behind them at number 4 was Jordan Addison, ahead of every current Green Bay Packers and Chicago Bears receiver. That's not a small compliment. In fact, some fans could even argue he deserves to be one spot higher. Despite dealing with an underwhelming 2025 season, Addison still owns more career receptions and more receiving touchdowns than Williams while playing in fewer games. The production has been there over the course of his young career, even if last season didn't fully meet the expectations many people had for him. Of course, rankings don't win football games. Contracts aren't handed out because of offseason lists. They're earned through consistency, availability, and continued growth on Sundays. That's why this upcoming season feels so significant. Minnesota has already exercised Addison's fifth-year option, meaning he's scheduled to earn around $18 million in 2027. But everyone understands that's only part of the story. If he performs at the level the Vikings believe he's capable of, and if he stays out of trouble away from the football field, that number could climb substantially through a long-term extension. That's life in today's NFL. Young stars who consistently produce get rewarded. The opportunity is sitting right in front of him. What's exciting is imagining what this offense could become if everything falls into place. Justin Jefferson continues drawing constant double teams. Jordan Addison takes another step forward. TJ Hawkinson remains a reliable weapon over the middle, and whichever quarterback wins this competition finally brings stability to the position. Suddenly, defenses are forced to defend every inch of the field. That's the vision Kevin O'Connell has been working toward ever since he arrived in Minnesota. But potential only becomes reality when players deliver under pressure. Addison now has the chance to prove he belongs among the NFC North's elite, not because of rankings, but because of what he does when the games begin to matter. If he delivers the season many believe he's capable of, the conversation surrounding his future could look very different by the end of the year. What makes this offseason so fascinating is that none of these stories exist on their own. James Pierre has an opportunity to become another Brian Flores success story. The quarterback battle between Kyler Murray and J.J. McCarthy might define the direction of the entire franchise. And Jordan Addison is entering a season that could shape both his future and the future of this offense. That's why there's so much anticipation surrounding training camp. Every practice matters, every competition matters, and every player we've talked about has something important to prove. I'd love to hear which storyline you're watching most closely because Vikings Nation always brings great perspectives. No matter how this all unfolds, one thing never changes. We'll be right here, believing in the purple and gold, holding on to hope, and waiting for the season that finally rewards the loyalty of every member of Vikings Nation. Stay tuned. Skol Vikings, let's go.